Perhaps this film will save someone's life. On Christmas night in 1966, in the United States, a murder took place that shocked the entire world. A 6-year-old girl was found dead in the basement of her own home. Suspicion fell on hundreds of people, including her parents and brother. For a quarter of a century, this mystery remained unsolved, though many people are convinced that the girl's murderer has been known for a long time. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was born on August 6, 1990, into a complete and wealthy family that seemed to have everything one could dream of. Her father, JonBenét Ramsey, was the president of a company specializing in computer sales. Together with his family, he moved to Bull Township, Colorado, where he purchased a large new home. From an early age, the girl participated in various beauty pageants, winning many titles. These achievements brought her early fame and provided her parents with an additional source of income. On December 25, 1996, JonBenét, along with her parents, went to visit friends for Christmas. The celebration was a success. The children were happy and had a great time, entertained throughout the evening by Santa Claus. On the way home, the girl fell asleep in the car, and her father carried her to her bedroom. That was the last time her parents saw JonBenét alive. What happened next shocked the peaceful and respectable town, turning it into the epicenter of one of the most mysterious murders in history. On the morning of December 26, JonBenét's mother woke up at 5 a.m. to prepare for a planned family trip to Lake Michigan. As she walked downstairs, she noticed a letter on the last step. The message stated that her daughter, JonBenét, had been kidnapped and that a ransom of $118,000 had to be paid for her return. This amount was not chosen randomly. It was the exact annual salary of the girl's father. Patricia ran to JonBenét's room, but she was no longer there. She woke her husband, who decided to go to the police despite the kidnapper's warning against doing so. Meanwhile, the mother began calling friends, many of whom rushed to support her. The ransom note claimed that the kidnappers would contact them within the next few hours, so they waited anxiously alongside police officers and friends. However, no call ever came. The ransom letter, the key piece of evidence in the case, passed from hand to hand. Strangely, the police did not interfere, nor did they thoroughly search the Ramsey home. Instead, they merely suggested that the couple check the rooms themselves to see if anything was missing. It wasn't until 7 hours after discovering the letter that Mr. Ramsey finally began inspecting the house. He went down to the basement, where he found his daughter's lifeless body on the floor. 2 large hematomas were found on the girl's head, and traces of blood were discovered on her underwear. Her hands were tied with white lace. With the body's discovery, what had initially seemed like a kidnapping turned into a gruesome murder. The police immediately questioned why the killer had written a ransom note. Even more puzzling was the fact that the letter had been written on pages torn from Mr. Ramsey's notepad and spanned 3 pages. This suggested that the perpetrator had written it inside the house while the family was asleep. According to investigators, the suspect was inside the home for about an hour. Yet, during that time, no one heard anything suspicious or woke up. This raised an obvious question: how could the murderer have moved JonBenét from her bedroom to the basement without making a sound or leaving any trace? Shortly after the investigation began, the police admitted to making a series of glaring mistakes. The house had not been properly searched, and by the time it was finally examined, Mr. Ramsey and a friend, not the police, had already begun looking around. As a result, critical evidence may have been lost, and the chances of solving the crime in real time dropped to 0. Initially, 2 main theories were considered regarding what had happened. An intruder may have broken into the house, someone who could have been a complete stranger, a family acquaintance, or even someone much closer. Another theory suggested that JonBenét's parents were involved in the murder. Upon learning that they were under suspicion, the couple immediately hired top lawyers. Following legal advice, John and Patricia firmly refused to provide written statements, which the investigation had hoped to analyze with the help of psychologists. Investigators intended to use specialized techniques to determine, with a high degree of accuracy, which parts of their testimonies were truthful and which were lies. The actions of the girl's parents further raised suspicions. They refused formal interrogations, insisting that they had already shared everything they knew in informal conversations with the investigators. The deeper the detectives dug, the more inconsistencies emerged in the parents' statements. For example, the mother told police that before putting her daughter to bed, she had let her hair down and removed her dress. However, the girl was found still wearing the dress, and her hair had been tied into 2 ponytails. Additionally, strands of laurel wreath, something the girl had worn during the holiday celebrations, were found in her hair. Another clue emerged during the autopsy. Undigested pieces of pineapple were found in the girl's stomach, indicating that she had eaten about 4 hours before the murder. However, according to the parents, the last time their daughter had eaten was at the Christmas party around 8 p.m. This raised the question, where did the pineapple come from? Investigators found a bowl of pineapple in the family's refrigerator, adding to their suspicions. Further doubts arose when it was discovered that some doors and windows of the house had not been locked that night. Why hadn't the parents secured their home? Had they deliberately left the locks open after the tragedy to mislead the investigation? Shortly before the incident, Patricia and John had distributed keys to their house to several friends, relatives, and household staff, allegedly so they could look after the home during the family's upcoming vacation. Another strange piece of evidence involved the ransom note. The girl's mother was required to undergo handwriting analysis to compare her writing to that of the ransom letter. Investigators concluded that she had deliberately altered her handwriting during the test. Another theory emerged, one that implicated JonBenét's father. He had been taking antidepressants for some time, leading police to consider whether he might have struck his daughter in a fit of rage, believing she was dead. To cover up the crime, he could have staged her murder as the act of an outsider. This brought renewed attention to the ransom note. Perhaps the parents had tried to divert the investigation, hoping that the police would not conduct a thorough search of the house. However, realizing that a search was inevitable, the father may have decided to discover his daughter's body himself. While the parents remained the prime suspects, they actively appeared on television, gave interviews, and even published a book titled The Fourth Instance, which they claimed revealed everything they knew about their daughter's murder. Detective Steve Thomas, who worked on the case, also wrote a book about it. Whether the parents aimed to clear their names or simply profit from the tragedy remained unclear, but over the years, the case of JonBenét continued to generate income for someone. The girl's parents also sued 2 publications that accused them of murdering their daughter. They won a settlement of $4 million, a victory that the public saw as yet another attempt to profit from their deceased child. Meanwhile, investigators pursued another possible angle, the beauty pageants. Police admitted that, due to her public visibility, the girl may have caught the attention of a man who later found out her address and killed her. This line of investigation was significantly more complex, as the number of potential suspects could have numbered in the thousands. Given this, the police made little progress in this direction, and the investigation ultimately reached a dead end. Meanwhile, the girl's parents actively profited from their deceased daughter's name, and with each passing year, the hope of uncovering the truth faded. But at some point, everything changed. First, it should be mentioned that the girl's mother passed away from cancer on June 24, 2006. Just 2 months later, something unexpected happened. A man named John Mark Carr, who had been completely unknown to the police, suddenly confessed to murdering JonBenét. He claimed that he had seen the girl at a beauty pageant and fallen in love with her. Carr had collected her photographs, newspaper clippings, and even dreamed of writing a book about her murder. At first, investigators believed that one of the most high-profile cases had finally been solved. However, it soon became clear that Carr was innocent. How was this possible? To this day, no one truly understands why he falsely confessed. Some psychologists suggest that certain individuals have a pathological need for constant attention, and admitting to a notorious murder is the easiest way to obtain it. Others believe that Carr was so obsessed with JonBenét's story that he lost touch with reality, his fantasies and real life merged into one, and he genuinely believed he had killed the girl, even though he had never actually met her. In reality, Carr could not recall any meaningful details about the night of the murder. He was confused in his statements, had no idea what the girl's house looked like, and, most importantly, police confirmed that at the time of the murder, John Mark Carr was not even in the city. He never explained why he falsely confessed. In 2008, the case took another turn. Thanks to DNA analysis, investigators determined that the blood found on JonBenét's underwear did not belong to any of her family members. As it turned out, the blood belonged to an unidentified male. However, when the DNA was compared against the FBI's database of criminal genetic profiles, no matches were found. After years of silence, another significant event occurred. In 2016, Burke, the victim's older brother, gave his first-ever interview. In his opinion, the murder of JonBenét was directly linked to the beauty pageants, where she was noticed by an unknown perpetrator. At this point, another controversial theory gained traction, the possibility that her own brother was responsible for her death. Supporters of this theory proposed two possible scenarios. First, Burke may have accidentally pushed his sister or caused a serious head injury in some other way, leading to her death. However, this theory seemed weak, as there would have been no reason for the parents to cover up an accident. The second theory was more logical. Burke may have deliberately inflicted serious injuries on his sister, which ultimately led to her death. In this case, the involvement of the parents in covering up the crime could be easily explained. After losing one child, they did not want to see the life of their second child completely ruined. But why would Burke have wanted to kill his sister? Supporters of this version point to jealousy as the main motive. With the arrival of JonBenét, the older brother was pushed into the background by their parents. Her success in beauty pageants only increased the public's attention toward her, further overshadowing him. This resentment may have built up over the years before culminating in a tragic coincidence. However, this theory also raises several questions. Burke was only 9 years old at the time. Could his actions have really caused a fatal trauma to his sister? And if so, how could their parents have forgiven him after what happened? In 2019, the case took another unforeseen turn. A 54-year-old inmate, Gary Oliva, who was serving time for possessing materials involving children, confessed to the murder of JonBenét. Gary Oliva had been one of the primary suspects from the beginning of the investigation. At the time, police searched his car and found a stun gun, along with poems he had written about JonBenét. However, they were unable to find any solid evidence linking him to the murder. On the night of December 26, the night of the murder, Gary Oliva made a phone call to his former schoolmate, Michael, and said, "I heard a little girl." Michael tried to get more details out of him, but Oliva refused to elaborate. After the call, Michael immediately went to the police and reported what his friend had said. However, there is little information on what action, if any, law enforcement took at the time. Years later, after Oliva was incarcerated in 2016, Michael began receiving letters from him. In these letters, Oliva confessed to murdering JonBenét. He wrote, "I admitted to killing JonBenét, as well as countless assaults on children and sexual assaults. I have signed numerous agreements with court officials regarding this case. I am a serial killer. I have mental disorders that I cannot control. I have told detectives about all the murders I can remember, and they recorded everything. But they cannot prove any of these murders." For a moment, it seemed as though the killer had finally been found. However, the story was not as simple as it appeared. First, a full year had passed since Oliva's confession, yet the case had barely been discussed. No charges had been filed, even though his initial admission had been known to authorities since the very night of the murder. Second, the suspect claimed that he loved the girl and had not intended to kill her. He said that she had tripped, fallen, and hit her head. This raised an important question: how exactly had events unfolded that night? If JonBenét had indeed fallen, why had her parents and brother not heard anything? If she had been trying to escape, why didn't she scream or call for help? Even if she had attempted to run away silently, an unlikely behavior for a child, the sound of footsteps, a struggle, or a fall should still have been heard throughout the house. But that wasn't all. Forensic analysis had already established that the head trauma was most likely caused by a blow from a heavy object, not by a simple fall. Yet, Gary Oliva insisted that she had merely fallen. Despite these inconsistencies, major British media outlet Daily Mail immediately picked up on Oliva's confession, declaring that the case had finally been solved. However, the case remains open, and all these sensational claims from the media seem like just another attempt to capitalize on one of the most mysterious murders in history. There is another strong argument against Gary Oliva's involvement. Do you remember the basement window through which the perpetrator was supposedly able to enter the house? At the time of the crime, there was a large spider web covering it. A grown man simply could not have crawled through it without tearing it apart. The lawyers hired by JonBenét's father defended a rather bizarre theory. According to them, spider webs are highly elastic and could have returned to their original shape even after someone had crawled through them. Additionally, detectives found no footprints or any other traces leading to the window or other possible entry points. Taking all this into account, one thing is clear: this crime remains one of the most convoluted and controversial cases in history. Among all the theories, each has its flaws. But which one seems the most plausible? After analyzing all the details of this case, I find the theory of the brothers' involvement to be the most likely. Many factors suggest that an outsider could not have entered the house without leaving traces, committed the crime in complete silence, moved the girl to the basement, and then left undetected. By ruling out an external perpetrator, we are left with 3 suspects. Of course, a 9-year-old boy could not have staged the kidnapping on his own. But if the brother was the killer, then parental involvement in covering up the crime would have been inevitable. This leaves one final question: if it was Burke, did he kill his sister intentionally? Perhaps he miscalculated his strength and struck the girl on the head with something, leading to her death. In my opinion, it was a tragic yet accidental turn of events. Most likely, Burke had been genuinely jealous of his sister for a long time, and the events of that evening pushed him to his breaking point. As for the parents' role in staging the kidnapping and misleading the investigation, there is another important factor to consider. Long before this tragedy, JonBenét's father had lost a daughter from his first marriage in a car accident. If Burke had indeed killed his sister on December 26, 1996, their father faced an incredibly difficult decision, either to destroy the future of his only remaining child or to protect him at the cost of the truth. This theory eliminates the possibility that JonBenét's death was merely an accident, as in such a case, Burke would have faced nothing more than sessions with a psychologist. However, if he had deliberately assaulted her, the American justice system could have handled the case very differently. He most likely would not have received a real prison sentence, but he would have had to live the rest of his life with the stigma of being a murderer. Summarizing this story is almost impossible. We can only speculate about what truly happened that night. The theory of the brothers' involvement seems to be the most logical, but we cannot rule out all other possibilities with absolute certainty. What do you think? Who killed JonBenét Ramsey? Share your theories in the comments and don't forget to like this video to help with its promotion. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Stay safe.